So the Oscars, they are right around the corner. We have been anxiously awaiting to see what the nominations were going to be. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about the Golden Globes, and recently other awards bodies have dropped their nominations, such as the Screen Actors Guild Awards, the PGAs, the BAFTAs. Everything is starting to really kick into high gear as we approach really kind of the crescendo of award season. But of course, the Academy Awards, the biggest award show of them all. We were just anxiously awaiting to see what the outcome was going to be. And it's an interesting field here. I think definitely all things sort of expected for the most part, a couple of surprises here and there, and maybe a few snubs even that we will certainly talk about today. But before we really get into it, just want to kind of call out some of the big winners, some of the films that probably walked away with little to no acknowledgement, and also just other considerations as we dive into this conversation. So this year, the most nominated movie is Oppenheimer with 13 nominations. It is pretty much making sure that it's going to be the 800-pound gorilla this award season. It's a huge movie that is just getting all sorts of critical acclaim across the board. Second, right after that, is Poor Things with 11 nominations. Killers of the Flower Moon has 10 nominations. Barbie has 8. Maestro has 7. And then The Holdovers, American Fiction, The Zone of Interest, and Anatomy of a Fall all have 5 nominations apiece. Now, conversely, on the other end of that, there are some movies that got completely shut out this year that walked away with 0 nominations. That list includes movies like Origin, which we're going to talk about later, Michael Mann's Ferrari, Priscilla, Saltburn, one of the most watched movies of the past couple of months, Wes Anderson's Asteroid City, The Iron Claw, All of Us Strangers, Suzume, John Wick Chapter 4, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem, certainly films that I think we have seen represented in other award shows from other critics and other awards bodies. But again, they walked away with 0 nominations this year from the Academy Awards. And so this also sort of sets in motion, I think, some unprecedented things that have occurred as well. Some history was made as it typically is every year. Just want to call out a few quick things here. But John Williams, he's received his 54th Oscar nomination.
Golly.
Which is just crazy to think about. This currently extends his record as the most nominated person alive and also the oldest ever nominated person at the age of 91. He was, of course, nominated for his score on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Lily Gladstone also made history. She is the first Native American to be nominated in the Best Lead Actress category. That is certainly an unprecedented feat, certainly something to be proud of. Martin Scorsese for that very same film, Killers of the Flower Moon. He is now officially the most nominated living director of all time. He just surpassed his good buddy, Steven Spielberg. He currently has 10 Best Director nominations. It's never happened before for somebody that's alive. He would have to get 12 nominations in order to surpass the all-time record. But he's also the oldest ever nominee in this category. He's currently 81 years old. Greta Gerwig, who we'll talk, I'm sure, a lot about, I believe she is the first woman to ever have her first 3 feature films all be nominated for Best Picture. Lady Bird, Little Women, and now Barbie have all been nominated for Best Picture. So certainly history made on that part in a positive light. This is also something interesting that I found. Coleman Domingo and Jodie Foster. This is the first time that 2 openly LGBTQ actors have been nominated for playing openly LGBTQ characters. So this has never happened before with 2 different actors in one singular year. So that is another note of history. There's also a person of color that is represented in every acting category, which is typically a lot of the conversation that happens every year where it's like, where's the diverse representation? Oscar's so white. But this year, there is a person of color represented in every category. And also for the first time in Academy Awards history, 3 of the 10 films nominated for Best Picture were directed by women. And that's Anatomy of a Fall, Past Lives, and Barbie. So certainly some big takeaways here. Obviously some snubs, some surprises that we will get to. We, of course, every year we do our prediction show where we'll go through every category. We'll give our final predictions. That typically happens a week before the show, which airs March 10th this year. So we'll do that later on. There's still a lot to see play out. But what we're going to do here is just kind of react to the nominations. We'll talk about who makes up the field, who's represented in certain categories, some of the bigger categories, and then also talk about, maybe who was left out, maybe who should have been considered or who we thought would have been considered. But before we really get into it, man, just kind of want to get your general opening thoughts. How did you feel about all of these nominations, the films that were represented that are being acknowledged this year? And ultimately, did you walk away happy with just how the nominations played out?
I'm going to add one more cool historic thing here. Sterling K. Brown and Jeffrey Wright marked the first time a black lead actor was nominated alongside a black supporting actor from the same film. That's also a first, which is very interesting as well. But man, this Academy Award season, to be honest, from at least a couple of the past previous years, was I think still by and large probably the most predictable. I know for sure when it comes to the 10 films that are nominated for Best Picture, I pretty much had those on the nose. I had those 10 were the 10 I expected. So no crazy surprises there. But I think this is a really good looking award season to me. It's one of my favorite list of nominees in years. All of the best pictures, 7 out of 10 of the best picture ended up on my top 10 list of the year. All movies I love. And even then, the other two on my list are like Spider-Verse and Boy and the Heron, and those two also got nominated. And the last one that's on my list to create the 10 is Godzilla. At least it got nominated for something. Godzilla's in here somewhere, and so I think I'm pretty happy with these nominees. I really don't have too much to argue against or argue for, even, to be honest. What I will say, American Fiction snuck in there. Like it did some numbers here today, and some things that I didn't expect to happen. Oppenheimer, as you said, it's going to clean up. But again, overall, man, I think this is a pretty straightforward list. Again, only a couple snubs from my end, and only a couple surprises from my end too. But by and large, a pretty predictable, I think, slate of nominations for the Oscars this year.
Yeah, I think walking away from this, no big surprises. It's fine, and I think the unfortunate thing about the fact that there are so many just award shows that occur before the Oscars, there's just so much information out there now. This becomes more predictable by the year. The good thing is that the films that are represented here, by and large, I really really enjoy. This was the best movie year that we've had since COVID by far in my mind, and so it's good to see that a lot of those films that I enjoyed so much at the theaters that came out are represented here in some form or fashion. There's some questionable things, of course, and also some things that I think generally a lot of the discourse that I've seen, I don't necessarily agree with, what people think or how they may feel on certain people who were left out or not considered or whatever the case may be. Because again, I think coming into this, it was fairly predictable. Even though, looking at some of those other awards bodies, they aren't as always predictive, for the Oscars as people may like to think. I think historically we see that the Academy really does go its own way, with a few exceptions. Of course, like Best Picture here, the 10 nominees match the PGA's one for one. Like they are the exact same 10 nominees that the PGA's put out. And so everybody a week ago were already saying like, yeah, that's probably going to be the 10 Best Picture nominees for the Oscars. No surprises there. But of course, like there are a few other shows where you look at the BAFTAs, which looks wildly different compared to what we're seeing here. I think for better and for worse, or even the Golden Globes, of course, which is just in a state of almost disarray. So it's really hard to ever really walk away with anything tangible from that show. But coming into here, I think it's solid. And by the time we get to predictions and the award show itself, I mean, look, Oppenheimer, it's really, there's not really many conversations to have at this point. I think it's just such a home run in so many of the categories. The fact that it was nominated for 13, that's just one shy away from the record of being one of the most nominated films ever. 14 is sort of sitting at a 3-way tie. I know La La Land is in there and a couple of other films. If it was considered on the VFX shortlist, it would have gotten that 14th nomination.
True. Yeah.
But it's still 13 is just ridiculous. And then Poor Things and Barbie, interesting because I think maybe a few months ago, people might have flipped those numbers. People might have thought that maybe Barbie would be up for 11 different categories. It didn't have things like cinematography, which, people probably would have predicted for it. It didn't get production design, I don't believe. And so some of those categories that we might have thought that would have been a shoe in for Barbie, it did not get acknowledgement from there. It kind of fell into some other categories. It sort of fell down the list a little bit, especially when you compare it to other movies like Poor Things or even Killers of the Flower Moon. But solid list overall. But let's talk about some of these specific categories. Let's just start off with the big one, Best Picture. Again, the films nominated here are American Fiction, Anatomy of a Fall, Barbie, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Oppenheimer, Past Lives, Poor Things, and The Zone of Interest. I think the one huge call out here is just the representation of international films. We have 2 different movies. Really, I mean, you can make a case for 3, even though like Past Lives is largely considered an American film, but The Zone of Interest
Hmm.
and Anatomy of a Fall for certain are
Yeah.
international features, and that is uncommon, but I think it represents just the diversity that does exist within the Academy. And now one thing that they touted at the announcement at the top of it before they started to read off all the nominees was that membership is approaching almost 11,000. So this is the largest Academy body that we've ever had, and a lot of that is made up of international representation. So we're seeing those films really make a big presence here. But beyond that, any thoughts on Best Picture? Some of the films included here, or any films that maybe did not sneak into this particular category.
No, I think I was going to call out the exact same thing. I think that two international movies being in Best Picture is kind of a big deal. It's not something we ever see, and it's kind of crazy just to see. Just to see him here. I was like, I again after the PGAs, I kind of knew it was going to happen. We were going to see him, but still, it's like, wow, both Zone of Interest and Anatomy of a Fall really make it in here. And so, yeah, I'm just happy. I think to see that diverse representation here, and I think, like you said, having more international people in the voting body is going to start to change these award shows. I think year to year, and even nomination to nomination. So I'm pretty excited for even what the future of that is to look like. And even we might see some of that even in the some of the other categories too, like animation, seeing what that looks like because the body is now more international and so on and so forth. Especially there were kind of some interesting surprises in, like, I know from like documentaries and documentary shorts and that, because a lot of times do come also from international filmmakers as well. So yeah, just kind of excited to see those be present here.
For sure. The next big one we should talk about, Best Director. A lot of conversation around this, but included in this category is Justine Triet for Anatomy of a Fall, Martin Scorsese for Killers of the Flower Moon, Chris Nolan for Oppenheimer, Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things, and Jonathan Glazer for The Zone of Interest. Big conversation piece. No Greta Gerwig, no Barbie for
Yep.
Best Director here. She
Hmm.
has been nominated in this category before. She was nominated for Lady Bird, but did not get nominated for Little Women. So this is now her second straight film not being nominated as Best Director, but the film itself ended up getting nominated for Best Picture. Justine Triet, sole female director here for Anatomy of a Fall, which I do think is a huge win. Greta
Yeah.
Gerwig is obviously, I think her absence in this particular category is stirring up a lot of conversation. But any thoughts on that, and just also who is included here, the five directors that are sort of up and running for this particular race?
The semi surprise here really is Jonathan Glazer in the Zone of Interest, just because he hasn't really done that much. I think in a couple of other award shows, but here I think it is, I don't know, it's just interesting not to see Greta here, and we had been seeing her, I think, in so many different other shows and categories. And so one thing I will say, this thing is stacked. It's just stacked. It is what it is. Nothing for or against Greta. It's just like, wow, these are the five nominees, and these are five very strong directing films from these guys. And so, man, I think the Greta conversation is warranted, though. That is a crazy big movie in Barbie, and so there's, of course, I think conversation that will be had outside of this category about Greta. But man, it is just a little surprising not to see her here, especially again coming into award season thinking, oh, it's Barbenheimer all the way, and Oppenheimer's kind of leaving Barbie behind a little bit. And so which again is a little expected, but I just expect to see Greta here, and it is interesting not seeing her.
Yeah, I mean, look, I say this frequently, but it's only 5 slots. This is not the
That's all
Golden
you get.
Globes where 7 people get nominated. It's not the Emmys where 8 people get nominated, or whatever the case may be. Like, there's only 5 slots, and so I think the point that people have said about, oh, we can't have more than one woman be nominated. That's clearly what the Academy is telling us, and I don't think that that's necessarily the case. Although it hasn't
Hmm.
really happened before, we've yet to surpass that threshold to see multiple women get nominated in this category. But from our personal taste, look, Anatomy of a Fall is a better movie than Barbie to me, and I think Justine Triet as a director did a better job, and that's specifically as it relates to one female director to another. But
Hmm.
I can't, I personally can't say that I would sub out anybody in this particular category, because these are not only incredible films and some of my favorite films, but just the jobs that these respective individuals did is just, it's really incredible work overall. Now, Greta Gerwig, she did a phenomenal job with Barbie, and I think that a strong conversation can be had that in the hands of maybe 95% of other directors, that movie could have been a complete failure. It could have been an absolute disaster if
Yeah.
not placed in her hands. She's a super special filmmaker with a particular taste and point of view that I think makes Barbie as special as it is and made it resonate as globally as it did. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
look, she directed what is now considered the highest grossing film ever by a female director. That is a huge win. So I think that is certainly all something to celebrate. But when we get down to just the pure sort of filmmaking aspect to it, and we think about the Academy and how they view certain films, look, there is still a certain amount of bias towards big IP and genre films, and Barbie is largely a comedy. There's a lot of comedic
Mm-hmm.
elements, and there's been a bias towards comedy films, comedy directors, comedy performances, comedic performances.
That's
I
true.
think that might speak to the Margot Robbie situation as well.
Mm-hmm.
That still orbits the conversation. Should it? Probably not. I think a fair shot should be given to even those huge tentpole films. They can be just as great as the small indie art movies, but we just know the reality of the situation. It's not quite there yet. And I think when you look at films that probably have a little bit more of something to say, like an Anatomy of the Fall or The Zone of Interest, I think that this ultimately makes sense here. But that being said, Greta Gerwig, her accomplishments, it's nothing to mull over necessarily, and nothing to smooth over, I should say. She did a phenomenal job, and this obviously won't define her because she's breaking boundaries in so many different regards that many female directors have not had
Mm-hmm.
the opportunity to do so. But while we're doing that, let's talk about Best Actress in particular. So
Mm-hmm.
here we have Annette Bening for Nyad, Lily Gladstone for Killers of the Flower Moon, Sandra Hüller for Anatomy of a Fall, Carey Mulligan for Maestro, and Emma Stone for Poor Things. And so once again, with the Barbie conversation, a lot of people have been talking about Margot Robbie not being
Mm-hmm.
included here. I just saw that Ryan Gosling put out a statement, talking about both Margot and Greta Gerwig and how he was disappointed to not see them get acknowledged, even though he did get nominated in his own respective category. So, what do you think about Margot not being one of the people considered here, but also, of course, the rest of the included nominees in this particular category?
I think it is a little unusual to not see Margot, but to see Annette Bening here specifically. Just again, given what kind of the energy of what's been going on in these award shows, that one was a little bit of this was a little bit more of a surprise. Not seeing Margot than not seeing. I think Greta Gerwig was a little bit more of a surprise for me. But that being said, this still is crazy stacked. These categories really are amazingly stacked. And pretty much everything you just said about Greta is something you can also say about Margot Robbie, as well. How not having this nomination won't define anything about Margot Robbie, and she's literally one of the best actresses walking the earth right now to me anyway. And so, man, what else can I say? I do wish, or I was thinking that that would hit more categories. Barbie would hit more categories. I thought it would get director. I thought it would get they would be president best actress. But again, it's just very competitive, and it's yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the actual award show goes when it comes to some of these, because the Oscars is known for some random surprises even after the nominations. But man, that's all I can really say is it was competitive, and I'm sorry, Margot, man.
I think a lot of people after they saw Barbie walked away with this idea that Ryan Gosling maybe sort of stole the movie because he
Mm-hmm.
had so much to work with. He had so much to chew on, a lot of the comedic beats, a very, very obvious emotional arc as well. Um, how do you feel about the fact that he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, but we're not seeing Margot Robbie, literally the lead of the movie? As he said in his statement, there's no Ken without Barbie.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you feel about that? He is getting acknowledged, especially considering, I mean, I think it's kind of ironic when you think about Barbie as a movie, what the movie is literally about,
Yep.
and
Yep.
what we're seeing happen here. Like, this is actually the real life manifestation of the themes of Barbie. It's the patriarchy, it's the man always
Uh-huh.
getting what they want, and women, being disregarded and ignored and often relegated to smaller things. And so, how do you feel about that in particular? That he was acknowledged for acting, but Margot Robbie was not.
That's crazy that the story like Loki just wrote itself. But what I will say is I think best actor in a supporting role is a little less competitive than best actress is in a supporting role. I think, at least again from what I've been seeing. So that's pretty crazy that ends up being the narrative is that Greta and Margot aren't nominated here, but then Ryan Gosling is like, did we watch the movie? What's happening here? What exactly are we leaning towards? But again, I kind of get it from at least a voting perspective, from a nomination perspective. I think I kind of get it, but that can't be like a good narrative for the Academy Awards. And I think that discourse for both of them not to be here is a little like you do gotta tilt your head just a little bit, like, oh, are y'all sure that this is what y'all want to do? But again, at the end of the day, this is their choice, and they've already made it.
I mean, two things. One, Margot not being here doesn't bother me at all.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that all of the performances included are better. I've seen Nyad. I think Annette Bening is really, really good in it. I will say I think Jodie Foster is better, and so I'm glad that she was also nominated.
Right.
And then the rest of them are also just like powerhouse performances, especially Lily Gladstone and Emma Stone. Like those two in particular, my two favorites at this point in time. I mean, they were just doing really, really phenomenal work. And so Barbie it's cute, it's great and all. I got real issues with the film, and so Margot not being here, while I think that there is something to be said about obviously the narrative behind it and
Mm-hmm.
literally what this film was speaking to sort of coming to life in these nominations. One of the things that's kind of interesting about this whole thing is also the fact that America Ferrera snuck in really as a dark
Yep.
horse candidate. And
Mm-hmm.
I said that last time we talked about Golden Globes, like, could there be a
You
dark
did.
horse? And I brought up her name, and it's just so interesting that we've not seen her really anywhere else represented, but she is
And here
now
she is.
being represented in Best Supporting Actress. And so she's not even the best part of that movie. She has a great scene, a great monologue, but Margot Robbie is better in that movie. She has to carry that entire experience on her back. So yeah, a lot of really interesting things, sort of taking shape here with the Barbie conversation. Again, I think a lot of it boils down to, really, if I'm being honest, the fact that there is still some apprehension towards certain pictures in certain films being
Mm-hmm.
nominated in certain categories. And there is no lead actor category that's acknowledging Barbie in any respect. These are supporting roles, which are kind of the lesser categories compared to best
Yeah.
lead actor and best lead actress, so they can kind of let that go. But if we're going to get serious about the shit, and we're talking about best actor and best actress, like, it's not there. And I think it was never really going to be there ultimately. And so it's interesting. They will have Margot Robbie at the show because she's a producer on the movie and it's nominated in Best
Mm-hmm.
Picture. So they got her there, but not quite to the extent of maybe how she wished for and hoped for.
Right.
But again, Barbie has been successful, many, many times over in many other respects. Best actor in a supporting role: Sterling K. Brown for American Fiction, Robert De Niro for Killers of the Flower Moon, Robert Downey Jr. for Oppenheimer, Ryan Gosling, of course, for Barbie, and Mark Ruffalo for Poor Things. This has been such an interesting race, just because I think it's a foregone conclusion on who wins, but just who makes up the category has just shifted a lot. Mark Ruffalo famously just did not get nominated for a Screen Actors
Mm-hmm.
Guild Award.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe people thought that Willem Dafoe was going to be present here, but he was ignored out of
Mm-hmm.
this category, and instead Mark Ruffalo got that spot. And then, of course, Sterling K. Brown making a lot of noise recently over the past couple of weeks with his inclusion here as well. So any additional thoughts on this particular category and just who makes up the race at this point?
Not really, man. This is one of the categories that felt pretty set in stone to me. The only interchangeable kind of was the Sterling K. Brown. I remember you asked me, I think we were going through the Golden Globes, what could be the random sneak in there, and I did say Sterling K. Brown, and here he is again, after being in a couple other shows. So again, this is the five I really thought. The only other thing in my head is no Charles Melton again. But again, kind of no surprise after seeing some of the other award shows before this, but yeah, I kind of expected this, but pretty proud of Sterling K. Brown for sticking in here. Regardless, I'm pretty happy for that. What Robert makes it again, but no Leo again. We see that kind of being a recurring theme. And really, yeah, really, that's it. I think Mark Ruffalo also makes sense over Willem Dafoe. I'm not mad at that at all. I'm actually pretty happy that they gave it to Mark Ruffalo. So yeah, pretty. This might be my favorite five in this category that I've seen in across other award shows. I think this is the five that makes sense to me.
Yeah, to go back to the Charles Melton point, May December did not get any acting nominations. It's lost a lot of steam over the past few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you really think about, I love the movie. I've watched it 3 times already. I think it's tremendous. But if you really think about the movie, I mean, it's taking aim and taking shots at acting. It's
Yeah, that's
about
true.
it's about taking down actors and what they put themselves through, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily a flattering portrait of what it's like to be an actor. And so I think that would turn off a lot of voters from wanting to support that film in that way. But Robert Downey Jr. is winning this. This is the
Yeah,
easiest predictable
it's pretty
category. I
easy.
mean, there's just no conversation really to be had. It's nice to see Mark Ruffalo get nominated, especially for taking a risk with this type of movie. I know he's talked a lot about his apprehension with portraying that type of character. If you've not seen Poor Things, he is fantastic in it. He's super funny, super despicable. But Robert Downey Jr., his best bud, his science bro, is going to walk away with it and earn that award. Let's circle back to Best Actor. I did skip that on accident. We got Bradley Cooper for Maestro, Coleman Domingo for Rustin, Paul Giamatti for The Holdovers, Cillian Murphy for Oppenheimer, and Jeffrey Wright for American Fiction. So you've already noted Leonardo DiCaprio is not in this category for Killers of the Flower Moon. There was also a lot of anger and angst on the internet about Zac Efron not being included for the Iron Claw, but also the Iron Claw not receiving any nominations. And so a lot of conversations there. He never really stood a chance, if we're being honest, just because he's not been a part of these conversations over the past few weeks. But
Mm-hmm.
Leo, I think, is a significant miss here, which is really interesting. He's obviously been nominated tons and tons of times. He's won an Academy Award already, and he's undoubtedly the lead actor of Killers of the Flower Moon. We've seen him represented elsewhere, but it would appear, if I had to assume, it would appear that Coleman Domingo is kind of the one that sort of etched in and maybe took away
Mm-hmm.
that momentum from Leo, because the other four kind of felt like locks for a long time. But Coleman Domingo over the past few weeks, he's been doing a lot of campaigning. He's been doing a lot of interviews, a lot of press to really make sure that his name and Rustin as a film is out there. Rustin's okay as a movie. I really like him in it. The movie's not that great,
Right.
but it does
Mm-hmm.
make sense. I think that he ultimately kind of won out over Leo, just in sort of these late stages of the race and how things shook out. But how do you feel about this? How do you feel about Leo not being here? And then also just like who makes up the rest of the category?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I do like Coleman Domingo sneaking in here. Very proud of Coleman Domingo, one of my favorite actors acting right now. What I will say is this does feel like a one of those I think categories where it's more up in the air than we think it is, or than some people might think it is. I'm actually, we know Paul Giamatti got the Golden Globe, and Killian looks really, but to be honest, in some ways, I'm like, is Paul Giamatti gonna bring it home? I don't know. Is Cillian Murphy gonna bring it? I don't know. And so seeing Coleman Domingo sneak in here for his role in Rustin is kind of cool. I just like, oh shoot, Coleman Domingo actually made it. So shout out to Coleman Domingo and Jeffrey Wright for both making it. We got two black actors in the leading role here, and I feel like we don't get that often either. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about this category because this is this is just I like all of these performances up and down.
Yeah, it's strong. I mean, there can only be one winner, but this means great things for both Coleman and Jeffrey Wright. They've both now had the opportunity, which they have never had before, to lead movies, and that's a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
conversation about their respective works. Jeffrey Wright was never the lead of a film before American Fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with Coleman Domingo. He's been working and working for decades. Like he's had a 30+ year career. Started off a lot in theater, and now he's able to finally come to the forefront, just showcase how much talent he truly is, and how great of an actor he really is. And so I'm glad to even have him in this conversation. I do still think it's a two-way race between Paul and Cillian Murphy.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm being honest, I I'm not ready to call it, but I mean, there's a lot behind Paul Giamatti. He's just such a
There is.
he's such a everyman, and I think
Mm-hmm.
again, he's another person that's been working a ton and for a really really long time, turning in great reliable performances for 30+ years in
That's true.
Hollywood. And so I think that there's a big conversation about him, but we'll make that call when the time is right. Let's keep moving on. Talk about a couple of other categories. Let's do the screenplay ones together. We have well, no, shouldn't skip the best actress in supporting role. Let's go there. In this one, we have Emily Blunt for Oppenheimer, Danielle Brooks for The Color Purple, America Ferrera for Barbie, Jodie Foster for Nyad, and Da'Vine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers. So again, another category with 2 Black people represented, both Danielle Brooks and Da'Vine Joy Randolph. Again, and also, America Ferrera sneaking in here, really, really dark horse candidate. Did not see that coming. And then I think Emily Blunt, Jodie Foster, they were both, really measured and really predicted to be a part of this. So no surprises there. How do you feel about this one? How do you feel about who makes up this respective category?
America Ferrera was a far left from me. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was like, huh? who made Best Actress? Yeah, so that's one of the biggest surprises probably of the nominations in this show for sure, or out of all these nominations for sure. But no surprises here. There's still a lot of steam, I think, behind of course Da'Vine Joy Randolph. Jodie Foster, man, is making a killing right now in these shows, and she wasn't necessarily, it's so interesting because I feel like she wasn't necessarily like in the conversation pre-award show season, and then award show season started and she's like, I'm everywhere, hello everybody. So I kind of love that for her. But yeah, America Ferrera is the surprise here, but other than that, man, again, gotta be proud of Da'Vine Joy Randolph and Danielle Brooks, man. Again, another category. We get 2 Black women in it. Love to see it. America Ferrera being Latina, love to see it. It's a very it's a very diverse, I think, set of nominations here. So again, this is a year where it feels like this specific category isn't as competitive, right? Versus I felt like some of the other categories are a little more competitive, but yeah, again, still pretty happy with the way this turned out. Just surprised about the America Ferrera.
Yeah, I'm not. Well, I'm almost ready to call it. I think this is Da'Vine Joy Randolph's year. I think that she's probably going to be the big winner. Something strange could happen, but it just doesn't feel that way. I think a lot of the momentum is behind her. I will be honest, and people might not like to hear this. I do not think America Ferrera should be in this category. Just like flat out. I just don't. She had a great moment in Barbie. Like, kudos to her. Excellently delivered, and it really drives home the point of the entire film. But come on, like, let's really talk about it. I think that that's just not something that I would have necessarily moved her up the ranks for, per se. Now, this category almost matches 1-for-1 with the Screen Actors Guild nominations, except we had instead of America Ferrera, it was Penelope Cruz for Ferrari. And I would personally, if I had to go to somebody else, I would put Penelope Cruz in this category over America Ferrera. That Ferrari is not a great movie, and it really doesn't work without her in it. I think she brings a lot to that film, and so if I did have to slot somebody in here, I would have liked to see her.
She was the one.
But yeah, but this is still, I think this is not necessarily a competitive category, as you already said. I do think that there's pretty much a clear winner. Jodie Foster, maybe, but Da'Vine Joy Randolph, I think there's just a lot of momentum behind her. That's where I would go. Let's talk about the screenplays. Best Adapted, we have American Fiction, Barbie, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and The Zone of Interest. And then in Best Original Screenplay, we have Anatomy of a Fall, The Holdovers, Maestro, May December. This is the single nomination for May December, and Past Lives. Before we talk about this, though, I do want to ask you this. There was a lot of conversation about Barbie. Where it would fall? Would it be in the Best Original Screenplay category, Best Adapted Screenplay category? Ultimately, it is an adapted screenplay at this point, I guess, based on the Barbie IP, essentially. How do you feel about that? Does it really make a difference? Does it matter? Does it maybe increase the chances that it can walk away with the win, that it's an adapted over original? How do you feel about that?
No, because the adapted is stacked this year. Part of me wishes it was original. To be honest, I don't know what how is it. I still don't understand how it's adapted. Like you said, it's an IP. Is there a story on the back of Barbie boxes that I don't know about? Like, do they give the rundown for each Barbie? I know, like, there's like Sunset Barbie and Skating Barbie, and they have stories, but I just don't understand exactly what we're adapting to make this best adapted screenplay, especially when you hear, I think, the stories of how Greta and Noah Baumbach wrote the story. You're like, no, this is legit something new and something fresh. So I'm still like, it's still weird to me to call it an adapted screenplay and not original. I'm not gonna say it's not weird for me, but yeah, I don't know. I guess it's kind of cool to see it here at all. Is also a world where, like, to your point, it's an original screenplay, and maybe five other movies are better than it and it doesn't make it. You know what I mean? And so I do like that idea, that maybe that's why they decided to make it adapted. They're like, let's keep it in the race, let's keep it here. But again, it is a little weird for me from a concept standpoint. Like, man, what are we adapting?
Yeah, that conversation's been going on for a while. Truthfully, I don't really care. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I mean, yes, it's an original screenplay, but there are Barbie movies. Like there have been Barbie movies. There's animated stuff. There is like
Yeah.
50+ years of like a lineage there. So I think that there's a case to be made that not everything can necessarily be considered original, because this is like a very well established brand and toy
Mm-hmm.
line, that does have a lot of things that can be pulled from, as we saw in the movie. I mean, look at the entire end credit sequence. Like that is the history of Barbie,
Right.
writ large on the big screen. But who, like, if we're being for real, like what difference does it make? Like if it wins,
Uh-huh.
it wins either way. I don't think it will win. So I think
I
that's
don't think so
probably,
either.
it's kind of a moot conversation because, best original screenplay, I don't think it stood a chance there at all. Like if you look at
Exactly.
Anatomy of a Fall and The Holdovers and Past Lives, doesn't stand a chance. And then best adapted screenplay, I still don't think it's going to walk away out of that category. It is just nice to see them nominated regardless, whether it was original or adapted. So we'll have to see. But any other call outs from, any of the other films that were nominated in either of those categories?
Just what you said, May December here being like one of the only, it's only nominations here is really interesting. Like it has lost steam over time, but it did start out hot. May December started out hot, but at least it is being called out for screenplay here. So that is, I guess, kind of the silver lining for all the May December fans out there. But no, not really. No surprises here. A lot of these films are in the category for Best Picture, so no, not nothing really much to call out here.
Okay. I think just a couple of more we'll talk about. Let's talk about best animated feature film. Here we have The Boy and the Heron, Elemental, Nimona, Robot Dreams, and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I guess in terms of snubs, there's a couple that could be considered. A lot of people really wanted to see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles here.
That's so
Mutant
crazy to me.
Mayhem. It did not get in here. There was also a lot of conversation as to whether or not Disney would be represented at all, because Wish is not here, but
Thank
Elemental with
God.
Pixar did get in here. Also, another movie, Suzume, did not get nominated here, even though it
Crazy.
was it was up for contention. It's a 2022 movie, which is interesting, but it did receive official contention to be up and nominated for the Academy Awards this year, but it was not included. But again, we are seeing, I think, kind of two big front runners with The Boy and the Heron, and then Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which is the sole nomination for Across the Spider-Verse. People thought that it might have gotten Best Original Score or Best Visual Effects, but it is not in those categories. This is the only category for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Literally one of the best movies of the year, and so it's an interesting sort of way that things shaped out for that particular movie. How do you feel about this category and just the inclusion of these films here?
Man, just wow. Those Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Suzume, which I did watch like last week, is just crazy not to see them, especially after knowing what Elemental is. And it's just, I don't know, man. It's just really weird. I think something the Academy, it does seem like they're doing is making, I don't know, this sounds really bad, but making people happy by having one of those international animated feature films, and that's kind of where The Boy and the Heron feels like it exists. But for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, just these animated features in general, animated features are having a hard time breaking tech categories. I think that's really interesting to not nominate Spider-Verse for score, and it's funny because it's been a surprise almost across, all of the pundits are like, what the hell happened to Spider-Verse in this score category? And I think I have to agree. It's like, where did it go? I really am not sure why they can't break a lot of those categories. And you kind of said at the top of the show that the Academy still has a little apprehension towards, certain nominations and putting certain things in certain categories, and they are getting better with what they're doing. But there is a little bit of surprise, and some snubs for Across the Spider-Verse, across some of those other, some of the other nominations. But other than that, man, it really is. That's also a two-way race to me. It's Boy in the Heron or Spider-Man. It's not even close. And we'll have to see. I still have a feeling they'll go the Hayao Miyazaki's very old route and pick the Boy in the Heron to win it. But you never know. Across Spider-Verse could surprise us for the W here.
Yeah, I think The Boy and the Heron is winning. I don't think that's going to change over the next few weeks or so. I think he's going to walk away with it. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse won a few years ago, and Hayao Miyazaki
Mm-hmm.
has won an Academy Award before, but again, this is like a late stage sort of career work of his that very much reminisces on his entire body of work, and I think that's that's an important aspect. These other movies here, I've seen Nimona, I just saw that yesterday, decent film, but I would have included other ones like a Suzume or Mutant Mayhem over it because those two films are
Those are
better
fire.
than
Yeah.
the Nimona. Haven't seen Robot Dreams. Do want to check that out. But yeah, Elemental. That's the one that sticks out. But man, Pixar, Disney, they will find a way every time out. They
Every
will find a
time
way to get in here.
they be paying people.
I guess the last ones. The rest of these categories I think we can save for our official predictions, but I do want to just call out a couple of other things, some snubs or just things that were not included that I noticed. I already talked about Across the Spider-Verse. For best visual effects, which is always like a really fun category every year. In this one, we have The Creator, which kind of snuck in there, even though that's visual effects wise, that's an incredible movie. They definitely, I think, deserve that one. Godzilla
Yeah.
-1. This
Yeah.
first time ever in history that a Godzilla movie nominated for an
Yes.
Academy
Yes.
Award.
Yes.
Also, if you've
Yes.
not seen that video of their production team reacting to their nomination, please go watch it. It's so charming and heartwarming. They stayed up late because it is the other side of the world to watch this, and so that was great. But Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is also here. Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, which got 2 nominations this year, a little surprising there. And then Napoleon also got 3 nominations this year. But I think the big one that's a big surprise for me personally that's not in this category is Society of the Snow. It was on the short list. That movie's incredible, and if you look at the visual effects of that movie, I thought it would have been a surefire bet to be included in this category because you do not notice them like at all. It is the most seamless use of VFX I've seen in quite some time. But that being said, I'm glad to see Godzilla -1 here. That's just such a huge win. So I just want to get your thoughts on that. How do you feel about the best visual effect category?
Yeah, Godzilla makes me so happy in best visual effects. But this is also another one of those things where it kind of surprises me. Could Spider-Verse not sneak in and get visual effects? You know what I'm saying? That's like the whole movie. I guess that's maybe that's the point. It's like the whole movie is visual effects. And then also was just a little surprised about No Poor Things too. I think there's a lot of VFX in that movie that goes understated that I'm surprised about that I feel like got snubbed here. But I'm so happy for Godzilla -1. I ain't gonna lie to you. I was like lit seeing that movie show up because I think that movie is really dope. And the things that we're doing in that movie is really impressive. So really happy to see it there. I was surprised to see all of the nominations for Napoleon. Napoleon kind of snuck in. It was just like, hey, I'm still here in a couple different regards and ways. The things I've been nominated for, at least they make sense. At least it's not like something I don't know random and crazy. So crazy to see Napoleon here. Mission Impossible, like you said, also like oh shoot. Hello, Mission Impossible. How you doing? Really happy to see that. Really happy to see Guardians here as well. I think what's also just really interesting is no Ferrari for sound. I thought was interesting. I haven't seen Ferrari, but I know that's probably like a big part of the movie.
Yeah.
So not seeing sound for Ferrari is interesting, and seeing creator for sound, I think is also interesting because I think the crazy thing about the creator is just the story was bad to me. Personally,
Truly
I was
bad.
just not with the story, but the filmmaking was there, and so I think I love that it feels like the Academy also feels that way to where they're like, okay, it can get some technicals, but yeah, no, I can't see all of the other awards. So I think that's really cool as well. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Some great things here. There was like a story that came out a couple of days ago how Godzilla -1 had a VFX team of 35 people, which you compare
Sheesh,
that to Hollywood standards, that's nothing virtually.
that's
These
crazy.
big Hollywood blockbusters, like a Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, employ thousands of people to do the VFX. They work with dozens
Wow.
and dozens of VFX houses just because of the massive amount of shots that they have to composite and create and complete. We're talking films that have thousands of VFX shots, sometimes in the 2,500s to 3,000s. But Godzilla -1, I think I read somewhere that it had about 600 or so shots, all made up of 35 artists. And so that's an incredibly small contingent of people who I know feel very, very bonded over this experience that they can stack up to the best of the best that Hollywood has to offer. So that's just incredible to see. Another one that did not get included here, as I said at the top, Asteroid City got no nominations at all. It got ignored in production design, which is crazy to me. I mean, incredibly competitive category. You know, you look at Barbie and Killers and Napoleon and Oppenheimer and Poor Things. And so I was wrong about Barbie. It did get production design, but Asteroid City, man, just a gorgeous film from a production design standpoint.
Yeah.
But Wes Anderson did get nominated. His short film, The Wonderful World of Henry Sugar, is nominated for best live action short. I'm glad to see that. I think it's probably going to win that. Really, really solid short film there. But overall, you know, I think it'll be a very interesting Academy Awards when they come on Sunday, March 10th. As I said, we will be back to do our full predictions about the week before the show. We'll go through every single category, all 23, all the documentary, short film, live action stuff included to do our final predictions. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on this year's Academy Award nominations. If you've listed or if you've looked at these lists of Academy Award nominations, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.